you kind of have two options. You either cut your commissions, or you cut your volume, or you figure out how to sell in that climate. And it's a different sort of pitch, right? Really learning how to sell value, and also having a strong foundation like with the company, because we've seen so many dealers and installers even going under this year just because of that climate. Like it's a lot harder. So if you have that stress to worry about, it's going to be a lot harder to go worry about your own personal sales and pushing volume.
So, I mean, basically, yeah, we ran into a lot of issues in 2023 with high interest rates, with, company outsourcing their installs. And, I mean, I've heard nightmare stories of 6 to 8 month install periods, sometimes glass not even getting on the roof, high cancellations, market saturation, tons of different things. So, you've spoken very clearly to the power of adaptability. Welcome everybody out to the D2D podcast. We got the Golden Door Deep Dive segment with me, your host, Roz. We got Addison Richards with us, brought to us from the sunny state of Florida. Dude, how's it going out there?
Going awesome. How are you?
Dude, so good. I gotta say, you probably got the best beard in solar currently. Chase Hermanson won the best mustache, but I think you got the best beard, dude. How long have you been growing that thing?
Appreciate that. Probably 8 years now.
All right. Yeah, Let's go, dude. Well, man, I don't want to waste your time or anyone else's. I just want to dive headfirst into your story. Like, how'd you get in the industry? How'd you get into solar?
Actually, back in high school, I started out knocking doors for a lawn service I had with a couple buddies. So we would just go door to door, knock random people, set up lawn care, snow removal, landscaping, kind of whatever they needed done. This was up in Ohio. I grew up Northeast Ohio, so kind of year round, whenever we needed money, we'd just go do that, find some jobs. Always liked doing that. Never really, in Northeast Ohio, there's not really much door to door. Like, I don't think anyone ever knocked on the door growing up. So I didn't really know that was a thing. We just kind of did it in some random neighborhoods. Didn't know there were like actual companies that did that, or that it was a career or anything about it. And then in college, one summer, I actually accidentally DM'd somebody because I thought they were somebody else that was a friend of a friend, that had come to do a recruiting presentation at my buddy's fraternity. Didn't even realize it was the same guy, but ended up following him, talked to him a little bit, and then started seeing some stuff he was posting on his story. Kind of hit him up, like, what is this? How does this work? And ended up driving down to Texas 3 days later to do pest control. So ended up doing that for 2 summers. And then I had heard a lot about solar, especially that second year. That was 2019. Kind of more and more as I was knocking for pest control, people would come out like, is this solar? Heard a lot about it. Saw a lot of people that I knew from pest control starting to get into that. So I started looking into that, talking to a bunch of companies, went on a couple blitzes, and then jumped in headfirst in December of that year, about 3.5 years ago now. So it's been awesome. Been with Kinholm, mostly in Florida the whole time, kind of knocked all over Florida. Started out setting appointments, started self-genning, closing, building a team. Now I'm running a couple offices in Florida, and we're going to be branching out throughout the country this summer. So it's been pretty incredible.
Let's go, man. Yeah, it sounds like you've had a pretty steady progression. Now walk us through this 2023. Because for those who are listening, the Solar Golden Door is based on a point system. So it's 100 points, half a point per install, and then half a point per set that gets installed. So what did your numbers look like in 2023?
2022 was my first Golden Door, doing strictly as a closer.
And that's when it was 130 installs. Exactly.
Yeah. So I hit that one. I think I did 160 or 170 that year, somewhere in between there. So I hit it that year, first year full-time closing. And then, they raised the raised the point system. Going into 2023, I was kind of stepping more into a management role. Wanted to hit another one, was just trying to kind of figure out how to make it work. So ended up doing kind of a combination of sets, self-gens, and closes. It was just a big mix because I was doing a lot of training with guys early in the summer, like on the doors, having guys shadow me, trying to self-gen as much as possible just for, production momentum, and then taking overflow as well for the closers throughout the year. So it was kind of just a hodgepodge this year, just kind of doing whatever we had to do to get it done. So it was a lot of fun though. Definitely a challenge. 200's tough, but it was really good.
Yeah, 100%. It's always fascinating to for me, when I've been so involved with Golden Door and seeing all these really high Golden Door numbers, in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, 100 installs for solar, like that's normal. And I was talking to a buddy and I was like, yeah, how many installs did you have last year? He's like, I had like 40. And I'm like, so you kind of had a crappy year, didn't you? And then he was like, well, dude, like I cleared 6 figures. Like I did all right. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm just used to seeing these like absurdly high solar install numbers. So I kind of, it changes the way you think about it. But, congratulations again on such a massive year. It was cool to have you at D2D Con, see you on stage and whatnot. So now kind of diving into the nuances of your solar career. You've been in Florida the last few years. Have you sold in any other market, or what's keeping you in Florida?
I have sold in other markets, sold in Texas and Ohio. Florida is just a great opportunity. There's, a combination of things. There's a huge population growth. There's a ton of solar, a lot of social proof, high utility rates. Obviously it's a sunshine state, so solar production is really good. Also, we're fully in-house here, so it's really nice to have no issues with anything there. Just, from knock to PTO, we handle the whole process. So timelines are fast, high quality, good pricing. So it makes a lot of sense. So I also really like the market. Like, you get to know it really well, kind of know the good areas to knock, good areas to have guys in, and kind of what those utility rates are, and just really get to know a market. And it makes it a lot easier to keep that volume, because you're not wasting time bouncing around every month, going to a market you don't know anything about, where you got to spend a couple weeks figuring stuff out, and then you start to get some production and it's time to leave. Like, really being in one place year round, just full speed the whole time, you really get to know kind of the nuances of the different areas and how to be the expert for that area to keep that volume.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. I mean, it's like, once you plant your flag, it's almost like, you become a member of the community. I've heard of some solar guys, it's like they're household names out in the areas that they're at, because, that's where they're knocking. That's where, they're in the same neighborhoods. And it's great for just really building business. So I think some people, associate Florida with a lot of old people. What are your kind of like tips and tricks on selling old people?
I mean, it definitely can be. I think that's where knowing the area comes into play, especially on the Gulf side, anywhere from Tampa to Naples. There's definitely patches where it's good chance everybody's 70 plus. And if you don't know the area, it's easy to get kind of stuck in those spots. But I think if you know where you're going, there's a lot of new construction down here. There's a lot of areas that are really up and coming, and you can definitely navigate around that if you know the market. But obviously there still are a lot of old people. So, I mean, it just comes down to like a ton of trust and not a lot of pressure. Old people are kind of notorious for having plenty of time to hear you out for 4 hours, but taking months to make decisions, or signing up and then, kids get involved, whatever, and falls through the cracks, ends up being a cancel. So like, if you're going to do it, take the time to do it right, figure out who needs to be involved from the get-go, whether that's family members, friends, kids, whatever. Get them on the phone, get them involved, make sure that they're actually serious before you're taking your time to go sit down with them for hours. It's a much more direct pitch. I feel like it's like, hey, do you want solar panels? Why do you want them? Okay. Now, if that all checks out, then let's talk. But if you're trying to do 200 in a year, you can't be spending a couple hours, a couple times a day with people that just have nothing better to do than listen to a solar guy. So it's kind of figuring that out in advance. Because there's definitely, just because somebody's old doesn't mean they don't want solar, but it does mean that they're going to be a lot more likely to spend time listening to something that they don't necessarily want. And it also means that there's probably going to be hurdles in the decision-making process. So it's really just deciding if it's worth your time. Conserving your time is probably the most important thing if you're trying to do 200. So if you're brand new, trying to like cut your teeth and get practice on your pitch and talk to anybody that will listen to you, that's a great spot, because you go into a retirement community, you could probably sit with everybody. But if you're trying to do volume as far as installs go, it's probably not your best bet, but there's definitely ways you can improve your odds. It's not really my thing though.
Yeah, it sounds like you play to your strengths and manage your time really well, and you're not going to waste time with playing the grandson when you know that you can hit like a new development or something else, because the area and exactly what's going to bite and what's not for you.
Yeah, know the area and know your customer. Then you can know where to go find your customer.
Exactly. That's awesome. So now I kind of want to dive into more of the nuances of getting to a golden door, because obviously it's a massive challenge. Talk to me about what do you think is like the psychology behind the golden door winner? Like, what is it that really drove you to go do it?
First of all, it's a personal challenge, because at the end of the day, can't really be a money thing, because the difference between 150 and 200, like it's obviously a pretty big difference income wise, but percentage wise, it's not. Like, if you do 150 installs, you're doing well. If you do 200, you're doing marginally better, but not enough to actually like make an impact in your lifestyle, probably. And not enough to really get, aside from actually getting the award. Like, nobody looks down on somebody that does 150 in a year. That's still really solid and respectable. So it has to be an identity thing, and just doing it for the sake of doing it, for the challenge, to prove it to yourself, to kind of push the limits. And I think we saw that a lot, especially this year. Like 2022, there were probably, I don't even know, close to 100 people on stage. And then this year there were like 25, I think.
Yeah.
Something like that. So it was interesting this year, because it kind of coincided with, not only did the requirement almost double, but at the same time, we went into a much different like economic climate with higher interest rates, higher dealer fees, utility rates, not at least in Florida, not quite as much of an increase as prior years. So it was definitely an adjustment where I think across the industry, people did on average less volume than they did the year prior, and probably made less money. So definitely figuring out how to adapt to that, to be able to not only go do bigger numbers than the year before, but do it in a climate where it's in theory harder, because you're not showing those same day one savings. Like starting out in solar in 2020, 1% interest rate, low dealer fees, high rates for power, big increases. It's like you show up, it's, hey, you want some solar panels? It's going to be $50 less than what you pay. And I'm going to make, a good amount per kilowatt, because I can sell that really high and still see that day one savings. And now it's you're to make that same amount of money, you're probably raising people's bills. If not, if you get a really good setup, maybe you're breaking them even. So you kind of have two options. You either cut your commissions, or you cut your volume, or you figure out how to sell in that climate. And it's a different sort of pitch, right? Really learning how to sell value, and also having a strong foundation like with the company, because we've seen so many dealers and installers even going under this year just because of that climate. Like it's a lot harder. So if you have that stress to worry about, it's going to be a lot harder to go worry about your own personal sales and pushing volume. So I'd say make it an identity. Like the decision has to be made beforehand, and it's definitely something to think through. Like I didn't just casually say, all right, I'm going to go get another one this year. It's all right, this is the situation we're in. This is what the climate is like. This is what the requirement is. This is what it's actually going to take to do that. So, restructuring the way that we pitch solar, choosing where we're knocking based on that, deciding how many per week, how many per month, the breakdown between sets, self-gens, closes, in advance, and like breaking it down so that then you can actually go execute on it. Plugging into with a good company that's going to minimize the workload and stress and like deals lost along the way, and then figuring out how to sell in the climate that you're in.
So, I mean, basically, yeah, we ran into a lot of issues in 2023 with high interest rates, with, company outsourcing their installs. And, I mean, I've heard nightmare stories of 6 to 8 month install periods, sometimes glass not even getting on the roof, high cancellations, market saturation, tons of different things. So, you've spoken very clearly to the power of adaptability and learning how to, grow and thrive within situations despite hardship like that. So what are some of your tips for reps to develop that kind of adaptability?
I mean, first of all, solar's a numbers game. Obviously there's an element of skill, like a huge element that's going to come down to improving your numbers, but the numbers always exist. So whether you're a first day appointment setter or, a 10-year veteran, you have some kind of stats where if you hit a certain amount of doors, you're going to get this many answers, set this many appointments, close this many deals, get this many installs. And so we're all always trying to improve all those ratios. But at a certain point, you got to know what they are as it sits currently and to know what it's going to take. Because it's great to say, well, I should be able to do this. But if you go based off just what you hope to do, you're probably going to come up short. So you got to know what the actual numbers are and then just keep a neutral mindset. So, if you go out and have a huge week and close 20 deals, that's awesome, right? But don't get too excited about it and start changing your inputs, because you don't necessarily know if that's going to be the same next week. Or if you go sell 5 deals and 3 of them cancel, or you have a week where you only get a few deals, well, it'll probably even out next week. So the math always equals out, and hopefully those ratios are constantly improving and getting better and better and better as time goes on. But it's not going to be an overnight thing. You don't just go from 1 deal a week to 20. So somewhere all along that process, you got to know what those numbers are to be able to keep a neutral mindset. So that way it doesn't really affect you either way. If you go do double what you normally do, great. Like take a second, celebrate the fact you had a big week, but then it's right back to it the next week. You're not going to take the next week off to even it out, right? Or if you have a really bad week, you don't start freaking out and give up on the goal, because it'll probably even out. You'll have a big week next week. So just that all starts from knowing where you're at. If you're just kind of winging it, it's really hard to be consistently do big numbers.
I think that's super powerful. And what's interesting, so here's the problem I see reps have, because I believe that model is extremely true. And it's very good at taking the emotion out of sales, because if you make it more about numbers and less about kind of your own emotional ties to the results, then it's a lot easier to control those inputs. I obviously, kind of like what I just said, the biggest downfall that reps have is that they put so much emotion into that and are so tied to the result that they forget that process. So do you have any hacks or tips for how to stick to the process and really hammer in those numbers and really just work hard?
I mean, it kind of sounds counterintuitive, but it's almost, you have to just forget about the result. Like if you're checking your bank account every Friday to see how much you got paid, checking all your installs. Obviously you got to check your installs to make sure they're getting installed, but banking on it, looking when they're scheduled for, already calculating the commission in your head, right? As soon as you knock the door, see what they're paying for power, you're already calculating how much you're going to get paid if they get installed, or you're doing the math in your head during the deal, or you meet this guy that was super cool on the door and you're already like, that guy was so cool, there's no way he's not going solar, whatever it is, right? You're putting way too much of an emotional investment into that, and you're kind of like counting your chickens before they hatch, right? So you almost just got to forget about the results and not care too much about any individual thing. Like you still give it 100% effort every time, but at the end of the day, you can't be like, crying yourself to sleep if a deal cancels because you thought the guy was really cool, or taking it personal, because it's really not personal. You can learn a lesson from it every time something doesn't go the way you want. And that's probably the most important part of actually getting better, is anytime it doesn't go the way you want, you got to figure out why, so it doesn't happen again. But you got to use it as a research opportunity, not a reflection of, what you are actually able to accomplish, or, your value. So just separating that out, like it's a business. It's a relationship business, which kind of makes it difficult sometimes when you do have a relationship with somebody and they cancel, or you really wanted this one to go through because you were gonna make 4 times what you normally make on that one deal, and then something goes wrong. But it's part of it. So you got to be able to separate that out and insulate yourself from it, because if you make it too emotional, you become too emotional to ever actually master that volume. And it does get easier with time. So the longer you do it and the more of a track record that you have, it gets easier, because you know that it's not going to be that way forever, whether good or bad, right? It all, you kind of have years of proof that it will even out. But that's the biggest trap that I see with new reps when I have new guys come out, right? It's, they're working so hard to get that first appointment, or get that first sit, or that first close. And, they're banking on stuff every step of the way. And so I have these, it starts out as like, oh, I have these really good callbacks, and then, they don't turn into sits. And you can usually see like who's going to have long-term success by how personally they take that. If they're like crushed by the fact that, they talked to a couple non-decision makers that told them to come back later and they didn't pan out, it's going to be tough, right? Because you're going to have a lot of that, and it'll happen with callbacks. It'll happen with appointments. It'll happen with sits. It'll happen with closes. It's going to happen every step of the way, where there's going to be issues with pulling those all the way through. It's going to happen at some point, and hopefully those numbers are good, but you're going to have some at every step of the process. So if you can not get too personally invested in that, it's going to help you long term as you progress in this opportunity.
Yeah. I think there's something super profound to exactly what you said, divorce the outcome, marry the process. It's if we're so focused and emotionally tied to that result, it just makes everything so personal. Every no is personal, and Doesn't feel good when it's like that. But when you take the emotion out of it, that's where you can thrive. So I guess just kind of like on a, to end the podcast a little bit, obviously your boots are on the ground, you're in the trenches, and clearly one of your biggest skill sets within the solar industry is adaptability. What are some things that you foresee, maybe some future challenges within solar that you foresee, and what's kind of your strategy to navigate that?
I think there's a lot. I mean, we're seeing more and more. Well, the big one I think is regulations coming, right? We're seeing it in some states already. And so the days of, you just roll into town and set something up overnight and you're selling the next day, that's more and more probably going to be gone. So hopefully everyone's been doing things ethically all along. But if you're not, your window of that is closing for the best, right? I think that's for the best of everyone in the industry, because the people that don't do things the right way only hurt the people that do and hurt the industry as a whole. So I'm actually looking forward to that, but it could potentially add challenges for the people that do things the right way, even just through, different regulations based on cities, states, utility companies requiring different licenses. And, it's going to be, I think that it could be a challenge if you're not based in one market to navigate that and make sure you have all the correct, licenses that you need and all those kinds of things. So, the easiest way we avoid that is just to make there not be a need for that, right? The more we can self-regulate, the more we can probably delay that. So getting the bad actors out of the space, holding people accountable, as leaders, holding our reps accountable to doing things the right way. And I think there's probably been a little bit of an uptick in maybe dishonest sales based on the climate, because, if you can show up and make 1,000 a kilowatt while saving somebody $50 a month, well, there's not as much of a motivation to mislead somebody or not give them, the correct system. But if it's break even or more expensive, that temptation is there to pad those numbers one way or another. So really holding the standard of accountability for ourselves, for reps, for everyone, for companies within the industry, to be honest and have integrity with our sales, so that it doesn't cause just, more stringent regulation than is necessary for everyone else. We're seeing, we don't know what's going to happen with interest rates. We haven't seen a lot of increases lately, but it's probably unlikely that they're going to go back to what they were. So learning how to sell in this environment, I think it pushed a lot of people that weren't serious about it out, because there were a lot of people that would kind of pop in and, make a quick cash grab for a couple months and move on. I think that the level of skill and expertise that it takes to be successful now has gone up, which also is for the best, I think. But, you need to find somebody you can learn from that knows how to sell value. And you need to have a really good value proposition for your customer that goes beyond just day one savings, because that doesn't exist as much anymore, right? Or it doesn't exist if you want to keep making the same amount of money. So you gotta raise the value for the customer through customer experience and making sure that you're with a company and you're someone yourself that's going to provide a lot of value a lot of lifetime value to the customer. So good communication, clean installs, fast PTO, support that they need, and be with them every step of the way. So, and then obviously, more and more people have solar, which is a good thing, but it will be more and more commoditized, which again, you got to find ways to separate yourself. So that's twofold. It's the company that you're with and it's yourself personally, but you really got to be the expert, because that soon as you sit down with them before they get installed, especially if you're in a state with longer install timelines, they're going to get knocked a few times. So, you know, if you don't build a lot of value and build a relationship with your customer and provide them value and communication every step of the way, somebody's just going to come in and sell them a little bit cheaper than you did because they have to do a third as much work because you already sold them on the concept. So it happens, right? Hopefully it's from door knocks and not permit poaching, but regardless, both happen. So you gotta really make it so that your customers don't want to go with anyone else and don't want to go with any other company by providing a lot of value and being the expert. Like, give it no choice, where it's not just a numbers thing. They really trust and have a relationship with you and your company. So just separating yourself as the markets get more saturated.
I love it. Well, dude, thanks so much for hopping on. Really appreciate all the nuggets that you've freely given. I take it you got the goal to do Golden Door again this year, right?
I do.
Well, dude, we'll see you on that stage next year. It'll be great.
Let's go.
All right, man. Well, thanks for hopping on, guys. Keep tuning in. More Golden Door deep dives to come your way.